Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live. You know his name and probably have bought a pair of his shoes. But who is Steve Madden, and how did he go from a fledgling startup founder to a multi-billion-dollar brand? We sit down with the icon himself to talk about his new book, The Cobbler, and what it's like to walk in his shoes. That and your comments coming up. Hello, I'm Susie Jackson, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. It's October 27th. Let's take a look at some of the top stories professionals are talking about today. Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court. The new justice fills the seat vacated by Ruth Bader Ginsburg after her death last month. Barrett is President Trump's third nominee to the High Court and will begin participating in decisions after completing her oaths today. Colleges are facing a major financial crisis. Schools in the U.S. considering deep cuts never seen before, like eliminating tenured teaching positions, pausing PhD admissions, and eliminating majors. The University of California at Berkeley and Ohio Wesleyan among the schools wrestling with these choices. The pandemic has cost colleges about $120 billion to date. Dunkin' brands may be up for sale. New York Times reporting the parent company of Dunkin' and Baskin-Robbins is in talks with Inspire Brands, parent company of Arby's and others, to be acquired and taken private at an implied valuation of $8.8 billion. Dunkin's business has benefited from drive-thrus and online ordering during the pandemic. For stories like these, you can check out the news modules to the right of your LinkedIn feed, or if you're on mobile, by clicking into the search box. With everything going on right now, resiliency has become an essential trait for everyone during this pandemic, and no one knows more about resiliency than our next guest. He's battled addiction, been to prison, and even survived the cutthroat world of fashion. Steve Madden, iconic shoe designer and store staple in malls across America, details his trials, tribulations, and successes in his new book, The Cobbler: How I Disrupted an Industry, Fell from Grace, and Came Back Stronger Than Ever. Steve Madden joins us now on LinkedIn News Live. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hi, good to be here.
It's great to have you. This book is a candid look into your success, but also into your failures. I'm wondering why you chose to write it now.
Well, I didn't write it now. I wrote it before COVID, and I started about 2 years ago. And, it was just one of those moments. It was just like, let it rip, let's get it out, I don't know why. I mean, I'm in a different place now. I told a lot of secrets about myself. And it's funny, I just did the audio. So I had to read it. I hadn't read it for a while. It's a bit of a vegetable during COVID and during the quarantines and stuff. And oh God, I wanted to burn all the books, but here we are.
So a vegetable during the quarantine, I think a lot of people can relate to that. Yeah. And you're saying you wrote the book before quarantine. Now we all feel a little bit changed since then. It did hit stands during the pandemic. What are you hoping people take out of the story, knowing you wrote it and then things feel a little bit different now? Do you see it in a different light, especially after having read it for the audiobook?
It's a good question. I had wanted to reach some, my fantasy was to reach some young people, and if they were in their 20s and they felt like their life was going nowhere and they had troubles, that there are second chances and you could make it. So that was my sort of fantasy, and I still kind of hold on to that.
Thank you, Steve. I want to say hi to some of the folks joining us on the stream today. We have Christine from New York City, Andrea from Florida. Welcome to the show. Dolores is joining us from Texas, Jerome from California, and Joyce from New Jersey. Thank you for joining us. We're having a conversation with Steve Madden here, talking about his book, The Cobbler. Steve, you just mentioned about trying to inspire some folks in their 20s. I want to wind back a little bit further, even to your childhood. You said you struggled with ADHD. And I think a lot of people can relate to having learning challenges. In the book, you shared this passage where you said you wondered how different my life would have been if I'd been diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, if my parents had thought to seek treatment or even put me on medication. Later on, ADHD helped me drive my business forward at a fanatical, single-minded fashion. But in my home and personal life, it's been much more of a burden. How did these struggles shape who you are today?
Well, as a kid, I had a lot of trouble in school, a lot of trouble. I do pretty good when I was small. I'd get A's, history, and then conduct. It'd be like a D. And they used to actually have conduct. And I used to bang the desk, and I was always cutting up in school, and I couldn't sit still. And it got worse as 12, 13, 14, it got worse and worse, and it was tough to focus. And so I can't remember what the question was, but, I was just an absolute disaster as a kid. And the only thing that quieted down, I guess, as I got older, as I became 18 and 19, if you think about it, if someone takes something and it quiets their mind and gives them some peace, well, they're going to start doing it a lot. And I feel like I was self-medicating.
Don't worry, Steve, you answered the question. And by way of the next one, just drawing off of that, you said in the book, you were saying that ADHD helped you kind of drive your business at this fanatical pace. So that brings me to when you did launch your business, you had $1,000 in the bank.
Yeah, well, let me just add something to that, Suze.
Please.
I got sober. So now I have ADHD and my brain is firing, and I'm able to, this is the good bits, I'm able to focus on 3 or 4 things at once. I'm able literally to have 3 conversations at the same time and not miss a beat, and be spontaneous and do the things that you need to do to start a business.
Are you talking to any other people right now, Steve, or is this the only conversation that you're having?
I'm looking at my daughter, who's 13, out of the corner of my eye, but I'm not talking to her.
Okay, well, maybe a nonverbal conversation there, but so that's good. So you're saying that has helped drive you to be fanatically motivated. But talk to the people who are having some struggles right now, who maybe have fallen down during this pandemic. You launched Steve Madden with $1,000 in the bank and this fanatical drive, but how did you stay motivated? How did you focus it all in to what you've created in terms of all this success?
Well, there's a lot of stuff to unpack in what you just said, but I will say that I really, obviously I was obsessed with winning, and also I liked making shoes, and I liked seeing people wear my shoes, and that was sort of part of the win for me. It wasn't just money, but if the more shoes I sold, the more people wore them. That was what kind of motivated me. So, and I was lucky that I did something that I genuinely love to do. And what a blessing that is. I feel so lucky. Maybe subconsciously it's why I wrote this book. It's just to tell all, like, I'm so lucky, but I'm really, please, I've been so lucky. I've had all these terrible things happen to me, but I'm so happy. I'm so grateful for my life, so maybe this, I don't know, maybe that's why I did it. Like just to sort of, unburden myself or something.
Some catharsis. It's a good time in life for catharsis. I think a lot of people are taking stock and looking back and asking themselves the same questions you likely asked in writing this book. And maybe some of the viewers even joining us now are thinking those things. I want to say hi to a few more folks. We have Linda from Massachusetts, Tamara from Chicago, Oliver from London, Deborah from Virginia. Thank you for joining us. Dolores says that she can't wait to read your book. So
Is that Texas?
Dolores from Texas. I don't recall. I'll have to go back and look when you're giving another answer. But Nancy says, thank you for your vulnerability. I think that's another thing we've seen a lot of during the pandemic, people feeling a little more comfortable with being vulnerable. Have you found that? Have you found that you wrote all this before the pandemic, but now it's a moment where people are being a little bit more honest about their feelings. Does this give you an opportunity to go even further into some of the things you're discussing in your book?
Well, we're doing it now. And, the pandemic was so crazy. The first couple of months in New York City, we were the hotbed of the plague, and I was nervous. It's like a package would come to the door. It was like radioactive. Like you didn't touch it for 2 days. I spent a lot of time with the covers over my head, but I'm out of that now.
I'm glad you're out of that. I
I
remember
am.
those times as well, the radioactivity.
Yeah,
Let's switch gears for a moment to talk a little bit about leadership. You've been at the helm of this company for quite some time, but there was a moment where you spent time in prison and you had to let it go. What did that time teach you about leadership from being, the name on the company to then having to step back and step back in?
yeah. It's one of the great lessons, business lessons that I have to share, and that is, doing things by yourself can take you only so far. You need to build a team if you want to build a big business. If you want to build a successful company that is going to last over time, you must have a team. And especially if you're as flawed as I am. And so I was forced to build a team against, it was counterintuitive for me, but because I went away, I had to do this. And so it in the long term, it worked out really well for the company.
Let's talk a little bit more about your hiring strategy. You have this big team around you, but I know that you write in the book that you don't necessarily hire for a specific role, for a specific skill. What is your approach to hiring?
Um, well, mostly for the most part, I try to hire people that seem smart, seem to like to work hard, and that I feel like I get along with, and or that people can get along with. And I think that being I didn't talk about this in the book, but I'm going to talk about it now. That being sort of socially adept, I guess they call it EQ, is very important in business. And you may not be the best in your area, but if you have the ability to work with people and work as a team, I think it will. You'll more than likely be very successful. So I think that's something that's under. I've had a few clankers, I've had a few very talented, not nice people work for me, and
Hmm.
they're brilliant, and at first they're like, comets, and they're just fantastic. But they eventually, I can't remember an instance where it didn't work, where the not nice people don't work out. The jealous and nasty, and they usually somehow burn out of a company. So I think that's very important. And I never really talked about that before, but it's something
Thank you for
just
giving us the sneak peek into
it's a
something that you
sneak
didn't
peek.
talk about in the book.
Yes.
Carol says that she really appreciates your transparency. She finds that very inspiring. And Helena asks you something that relates to that question. She wants to know, how did you overcome speaking openly about your past and sharing difficulties? You just shared with us some honest nugget right there that you've hired some clankers in your life. How does it feel? How have you gotten to the place where you can say that on a show when you feel comfortable with it? Helena wants to know.
You know, I figured that in the age of Google, it's best to get things out there because everybody can find everything out. And as we say, you're only as sick as your secrets. I like to say that.
So people are going to find out anyway. So you might as well be the one to deliver
I
that
think
message
so.
of transparency.
And I think there's a lot of, you know, I remember seeing this interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they asked him if he took steroids when he was younger. Now, we all know that he did, Arnold, you know, and he like denied it. And I thought to myself, how silly is that for Arnold to do that? He's a great guy. He should have said, I was young and I was foolish and I took them. And, but I think he could have said that and it wouldn't have mattered, but instead he opted for the other route. So Arnold lost a couple of points, but he still became governor.
He did. So there's a bright side for everything if you can figure out how to
Yeah.
spin it that way.
Yes.
I'm interested in the space that Steve Madden operates in. When you first started out, you were one of the only designers who was specifically thinking about younger women, and that's not true anymore. There's a lot of people in that space. I'm really curious about what you've learned in terms of how you talk to that market. Is it different now in the age of social media and different ways of connecting than it was when you first started out?
Well, when I started out, there was no social media. So, it was magazines, it was stores, it was word of mouth, and we had a great ad campaign in the 90s, and which probably is superfluous now. But now, we just have on our team are people that live and breathe social media, and we're very much a force there. I don't know if I answered your question, but it goes back to the team thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're on social a lot, of course. It's a great way to reach folks. But I'm wondering if the way that you have to talk to this market is different. Now that there's a lot of other people trying to talk to those same customers.
I think that you can't be too clever here. I think that people can smell out when something's not cool. And so at times when we're confused, we retreat to some principles in the company, which is just to make cool shoes. Just to make cool shoes. Don't overthink it. Let's just make the best product we can, put them out at great prices, and it'll sort itself out. And it seems to be working.
Something I thought was really interesting that you wrote about in the book was that you always want to stand behind the product. You always want to really believe in it. So that means you were talking about clinkers earlier. You said you never would want to put out a clinker, even if that was going to sell like gangbusters. Has that ever held you back, held the business back, or are you proud of where that principle has brought you?
Not sure the question you're asking me.
You were in the book. You were writing about how you want to always believe in a product, even if it's
yes,
and you'd never want to put out a product you didn't believe in just because it was going to sell really well. And I'm curious about how that helped shape the business.
It's a good question. So you do the best you can. You're making great shoes all the time, and there are shoes that maybe you're not sure about. It's not a game of perfect, but we just try, and the team and I, we just are always thinking about what's next and what's cool, and every once in a while you step in a pothole.
Well, if you step in a pothole wearing a Steve Madden platform shoe, you're not even going to fall that far. So maybe that's some good.
And our waterproof boots are great too.
We have Elif in the stream who's saying this is really inspiring. Love your design and your courage. And we have a question from Andrea in the stream saying, what is your advice to a would-be entrepreneur out there looking to start a business during the pandemic?
Oh my. Yeah, well, it would be the same as if it wasn't during a pandemic. It would be to learn before you go into a business, make sure you know everything about it and do some work. In baseball, before they go to the majors, they play in the minor leagues and they learn their craft. And I think that would be the advice I would give to someone.
All right. So that's great advice for any aspiring entrepreneurs out there. Steve, I want to thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live today and sharing all this inspiration with our audience.
It was so great to be on. I enjoyed it.
Great to have you. That was Steve Madden, founder of Steve Madden Ltd. And author of The Cobbler. Tomorrow, my colleague Caroline Fairchild will be chatting with the CEOs of two companies disrupting the home buying business, from picking your dream house to financing it. You won't want to miss that show. You tune in tomorrow at 12 Eastern. I'm Susie Jackson. Thank you so much for watching LinkedIn News Live.